Hello and welcome to episode 19 of the BigFooty Bombercast, the grand final edition. You've got your host, myself, Kyptastic. Joining with me is the usual host. He's taking a bit of a break from the responsibility. Poncer34, how are you doing, Poncer? How have you found the final series?
I'm doing well, mate. I've enjoyed the fact that I've thrown it to you at the very last second and gone, do you want to host? Because I'll just cruise in the background. The final series was pretty good this year, I thought, apart from obviously the first week, but we've discussed that in earlier episodes. The Bulldogs, I was pretty filthy. They got all the way to the big dance. I certainly don't think they deserve to get past Brisbane. But, you know, in the end, it was a good grand final for, 2.5 quarters. And then, well, actually, it was probably a good grand final for 3 quarters, really, because I think Melbourne kicked 3 goals in the last minute. So up until that stage, it was a pretty competitive game. And then, you know, they just blew the Bulldogs apart, which was pretty disappointing from a neutral point of view, but at the same time, pretty satisfying to see the Dogs get smashed in such a pathetic way on such a big stage.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of Essendon fans who agree with you on that, Bonser. I think even with the one-sided nature of the final quarter, you know, still seeing a team perform at that level, even if it is a demolition, is still pretty interesting. Also joining us tonight is Sporno for Pyros. Sporno, how are you? How did you find the grand final?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really felt for the long-suffering Demons fans, so it was really good to see them get over the line. Oh, they didn't get over the line. They really seized the moment, and it was just a fantastic ride. And I really enjoyed the last quarter and a half of the match.
Yeah, absolutely. So going into the grand final and looking at it as a neutral party, both of you, what was the thing that you were thinking that would decide the game? What was the point of difference between the teams? Bonser, for you, that you felt would resolve the match?
Yeah, look, I thought Max Gawn was probably going to play a bigger role than he ended up doing. I thought that the ruck department of the Ds was going to be the key, because I thought if they could direct the ball to the Ds midfield, get on top, that would go a long way to winning the game. Because it sounds a little bit silly considering how deep the Bulldogs went this season, but outside their midfield and the fact that Josh Bruce didn't play, they don't have great key position players. I mean, Alex Keith is all right, but I wouldn't have him in the top 10 key position defenders in the league. And maybe I'm being a little bit harsh then. And then, you know, they got Josh Shackey, who, you know, again, I wouldn't have him in the top 20 key position players. I wouldn't have him anywhere near the top line of the key position players. So really, for mine, it was going to be, could Gawn and Jackson get comprehensively on top of Martin and English in such a way that the Bulldogs midfield weren't going to be able to use any advantage that they had in numbers, because the Bulldogs midfield, I still think, bats deeper than Melbourne's. I mean, I know that there's been a lot of talk about James Harms and a few other Melbourne midfielders now being talked up as superstars because they won the grand final. But the reality is it's Petrarca, Oliver, and then a bit of daylight. Langdon on the outside, I suppose, as well. But yeah, so they're the two A grades. So I thought the ruck was going to be the big challenge for the Dogs. And I suppose, to a certain degree, I was right in the end, because, I mean, Luke Jackson in the middle towards the end of that third quarter did dominate, probably turned the game on its head. It was just, I expected Max to be the man that sort of stood up. And, unfortunately, I did place a bet on him to win the Norm Smith, and he got nowhere near it in the end. So that was probably a sign that I shouldn't have done that. At the second that I put it down, he was always going to struggle, I think.
Yeah, you make some good points. I agree with you in terms of the ruck, and I think it's a big problem for the Bulldogs going forward. Martin's obviously closer to the end than he is the beginning, and English hasn't come on as well as they had. And if they can't have that ruck dominance against the teams that have the midfielders to match them, they're going to struggle, as we saw in our game in regular season, where Draper took control of the game. So what about in terms of the midfield? My initial impression with the midfield, as Bonser said, was that other than the top two for Melbourne, that second string Bulldogs midfield of Treloar, Dunkley, Smith would be too much for Melbourne. What were your thoughts with regards to the midfield battle and how it played out compared to how you thought it would?
Yeah, I've got huge respect for the Bulldogs midfield. I think it's, you know, there's so many A graders in there, and I was there thinking that's where the Bulldogs are going to perhaps get the edge over Melbourne. And with, you know, there was a lot of talk going into the match. Are they going to target Max Gawn and things like that? And I thought with Beveridge having 2 weeks to plan for that match, I was a little bit surprised that they didn't really attack Max Gawn as was sort of said in the paper. Then I think the young fella I've forgotten his name just off the top of my head, was going so well that Max Gawn was just saying, yeah, you just stay in there. So I thought if the Bulldogs were going to win it, it was going to be with their midfield, because obviously their weakness is their back line, and probably Melbourne's weakness is probably their forward line. So that was always going to be interesting. Was Melbourne going to score enough goals, or could the Bulldogs stop the goals? So that was always going to be interesting for me, the Bulldogs back line versus the Melbourne forward line was also going to be something interesting. And I thought, well, if Bulldogs midfield gets on top here, look out, this is going to be game on. What about you, Bonds?
The other guy that I want to mention is one that I think's probably fallen a little bit under the radar because obviously Petrarca dominated, Fritsch kicked 6, but Christian Salem had a ripping game as well. He had an amazing game, I thought, and for large parts of that game, I thought he had one hand on the Norm Smith medal before Petrarca ripped it away from him. I mean, in the end, he kicked a goal, which is great for a halfback flank running type. It's the Nick Hines sort of role. He had 22 kicks, 5 handballs, but he laid 7 tackles, 7 marks as well. He was the second for the metres gained on the field. So, Petrarca had nearly 900 metres gained, but Salem had 640 and no one else got anywhere near him. And he had 8 score involvements. So,
wow.
It's just, you just look at it and go, yeah, okay, Petrarca had an amazing game, and so did Fritsch. But gee, Salem's game just sort of floated under the radar a little bit.
He doesn't seem to make errors either, does he? He's just so with it when he's got the ball and kicking the ball. He just seems to be so accurate. He's just beautiful to watch.
He's just such a silky player off that half back line, and he's almost like, I suppose, the opposite of Hind in a way, because Hind operates at this frenetic speed that you sort of look at and go, does he know what he's doing when he's got the ball? Whereas Salem, he has that quickness, but he's just silk. He just seems to be under control, calm, composed the whole time. And that's not taken away from Nick Hind, because Nick Hind operates at a frenetic speed, but he's still controlled. But yeah, they are very different players. And if we could find someone who just had that little bit of, I suppose, silk that Salem seems to have, it would make our backline stand up so much better.
It's interesting with regards to Salem. You look at what the Bulldogs had in the first half with Caleb Daniel playing a similar role off half back, and he was dominating in that first half. And they actually started him on the bench in the third quarter. Obviously, the Melbourne domination didn't start till later in the third quarter, but as Daniel went out of the game and had less of an impact, you saw that Melbourne was able to take over, and you have Salem. And I thought Viney and Brayshaw played really crucial roles as that second tier midfield to really push them in that third quarter when the going was hard, and then allowed them to have that top class of Petrarca and Oliver get on top and just blow the Bulldogs away. Do you think the fact that the Bulldogs played that extra final and did so much more travel had an impact on the game, Sporno, or was it the 2 weeks should have been sufficient for them to recover?
No, I don't think it had any effect on them. I think they got found out. They'd played us. We pushed them. That could have been a lot closer, that match. Brisbane pushed them. Port Adelaide, as it turns out, when you look closely, they don't really have a midfield. So no wonder Kane Corns is trying to get more midfielders over there, because once you get past their big 2 in Port Adelaide. So I thought that the best side won. And I think they sort of got found out on the big stage. And it's sort of really interesting, though, because, I was thinking back in 2016, their victory is a bit like us winning in 1993. And then that didn't really eventuate till 6 or 7 years later. So we're in that sort of 6 to 7 year later window for them. And I thought that this sort of little era is going to be for them the next 3 or 4 years. So what about you guys? Do you think potentially this could be a little, they're already talking dynasties, I know. What about you, Kip?
Anytime a team wins a premiership, you're talking dynasty. I think there's been a lot of comparisons with the Bulldogs with Hawthorn and their era. They had the win in 2008, which in hindsight is probably a bit before their time. And then they went on to win 3 flags in a row after losing 1 in 2012. So I'm sure there's a lot of Bulldogs fans holding out hope for that sort of similar thing to happen for them. They'll go on to win the next 3. Obviously, we don't want that. Melbourne, the core of that group is very young and could stick together quite well. And with the high end of Petrarca and Oliver and Gawn, obviously Jackson coming through, they're going to have a lot of chance for success in the future if they keep that core together.
I think they had 8 players sort of around the 25 year, like Salem, Petrarca, Oliver might be a year younger, I think. And then they had about 8 players under the age of 21. So it was great to see that, and they've set themselves up beautifully, I think. What about the fact that we've mentioned the Jackson and Gawn combination? Do you think that could have ramifications for the rest of the competition? Could we be seeing Draper and Brian being used in tandem? Is it going to set a trend, the two ruckman trend, do you think?
I think there's a tendency after a side wins a flag to try and copy what they do, but I don't see. I mean, the Bulldogs, okay, they had Martin and English, but they didn't play two ruckman all year. Really, English did play forward, and who'd they have? Jordan Sweet or whoever the other bloke was playing ruck. But I think Melbourne are in a pretty unique position. We're hoping to find ourselves in a very similar unique position, but to have two quality ruckmen is almost non-existent in the AFL, and to play two quality ruckmen is even rarer. So I think if sides go down that path, they're going to find themselves sorely lacking the same impact that Gawn and Jackson have had for Melbourne. It's just something that happens as soon as a flag is won. Everyone looks at a side and goes, "Well, what makes them different? How do we copy?" Well, I don't think you can. I think that's probably. I don't want to sound harsh, but it feels to me when people start doing that, it's lazy analysis, because okay, they have a point of difference, but just because they're different doesn't mean that's going to resonate around the rest of the league. But that's just my thoughts.
Gawn and Jackson work because both can contribute and can play quite well forward. You need to have that option, because you can't just have your ruckman. You can't just rotate your ruckman through the bench. You run out because of limitations of interchange. So your ruckmen have to contribute forward. We've seen in the Essendon case, a lot of people want to see Brian and Draper together, but neither have shown strong forward craft yet. Draper obviously can take a grab, but his kicking is hit and miss. And Brian hasn't had that experience either, and he's obviously quite young. So it's interesting. It'd be interesting to see if they do try and develop their forward craft, particularly Brian in the VFL, I would imagine, if we're going to play that way. Otherwise, it might not be something that we'll be able to copy as an Essendon team. Just before we wrap up on the grand final, obviously Melbourne has a strong Essendon connection with Hibberd. Melksham obviously didn't play, and then the great Neil Danaher. Was that something that you were looking for in the grand final, hoping that Melbourne would get up for those guys?
I think everyone was sort of really hoping that they'd do it for Neil, weren't they? And it was great to see that photo that came out on Instagram shortly afterwards of Neil. And, Hibbo, I was really glad for him. So, yeah, definitely it was added a bit of icing on the top of the cake for me.
Yeah, look, I was hoping they'd win it for Neil, because Neil Danaher has been a massive part of the Essendon Football Club as well as his time in Melbourne. So that was, and it was nice to see Hibberd winning a flag. His celebration did bring a smile. And, I mean, even Simon Goodwin, he's had his time with us. So it was nice to have that little bit of an Essendon connection. But, yeah, it's nice, but it probably doesn't mean a great deal, because at the end of the day, they're not wearing the red and black jumper, are they?
Agreed. Moving on to award season, we had the Brownlow previous Sunday night before the grand final, and that was followed by the Crichton medal. Obviously, for Essendon fans, they were watching out for how Parish and Merritt would go, and they did quite well, finishing very high up. So Parish equal fifth, and Merritt in the top 10. Bonser, what was your expectations for the night? Did you hold out hope that Parish or Merritt would steal a win, or were you pretty realistic about where they would finish?
Well, I had money on them both to win, so I was hoping like hell that one of them would manage to steal it. But again, I think it's probably a year too early for Darcy, and unfortunately for Zach, even though this year we finally got the wins that he probably needed to sneak a Brownlow, he now has a counterpart in Darcy stealing votes off him. So it'll be interesting to watch those two moving forward. The interesting thing that I found, though, was even though that Darcy did poll 6 votes more than Zach actually polled in 2 more games. So Zach polled in 12 games, and Darcy only polled in 10. So it's quite an interesting little snippet, I thought, looking at that. And if you look across sort of the league, I reckon and I haven't done any stats on this, so somebody can have a look if they want, but I reckon Darcy, in terms of games polled, probably had nearly more 3 votes than anyone else, because he averaged 2.6 votes a game when he polled, whereas Ollie Wines was only about, if I want to go off the top of my head, he was about 2.2 votes. So, yeah, I think Darcy probably polled more votes in per game polled than anybody else in the league, which is just a little bit of a funny stat that I picked out of the results.
It always makes it more interesting Brownlow night when you've got someone in the mix, though, doesn't it? Whether it's those two boys or Joe back in 2012, it's always a bit more fun watching it when you've got a bit of skin in the game.
Absolutely. And I think, as you point out, in terms of Darcy, high votes per game that he polled in, it shows the difference between his high points and his low points. Obviously, he started to get more attention in some games later in the year and had the tag that obviously would have cost him votes in those games. So that's just the next step of his evolution, is to move on and be able to break that tag. Moving on to the Crichton, which occurred a couple of days later, the top two was reversed there in terms of Essendon, with Merritt taking out top spot, his third Crichton, which I would say makes him an all-time Essendon great, followed by Darcy in second, and then Will Snelling in third. Any takeaways from the Crichton for you, Sporno? What was your thoughts on the top 10 and the finishing places?
It was good to see the top 10. I've got to say I was a bit surprised at the difference between Merritt and Parrish, between first and second. I think it was well over 50 points. It could have been close to 80 points difference, which really surprised me. But then it was good to see Snelling come in at third. It shows that he's really doing the team things that is rated by the coaches. And then to see Ridley and the package round out the top five. You know, I'm a big Jakey Stringer fan. He's just exciting to watch.
Well, in regards to Snelling, he did miss 3 games after the West Coast game with the broken thumb. And if you go back into the Crichton thread on the board, someone's done a breakdown of votes per game. And Snelling actually has higher votes per game than Parrish. So if he played a full season, then he actually finishes second in that count. But we still get the bit of the shocks about where he finished. I had him as a definite top 10, probably more around the 5 area, but I don't think 3 is a unrealistic spot for him based on how the coaches see his role. He still gets that criticism from a lot of people that he doesn't deserve that higher praise, and there's still people who would not consider him best 22. Bonser, what are your thoughts about that?
Look, Snelling is absolutely best 22, and I think in the very first one this year, when Jade and I were talking, the mention was that Snelling makes a good 15 to 22, and I think Jade made the excellent point at the time that if we consider Snelling in that 15 to 22 bracket, then Jesus, our top 15 is going to be pretty bloody good, because he has been excellent ever since we picked him up. I will be honest though, I just don't see how he finishes third. I mean, traditionally, if you don't play every game in the Crichton medal, you do struggle to poll well, I suppose. And for him, if he played 22 games and had beaten Parrish in the best and fairest, I don't think anybody would have thought that was a realistic result. And I mean, he's beaten Ridley, and I look at that and go, how did he beat Ridley? I mean, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I think Ridley's a victim of his own hype. That we expect so much of him that if he doesn't deliver an A+ performance, we're all a little bit, he was a bit underwhelming, even though, the bloke's 21 years old and is going to be a genuine superstar. But yeah, I mean, look, I don't know I don't really know how that they do the votes. It doesn't really make sense to me that Snelling won. I have no issues with him coming third. If that's the way the coach saw it, that's fine. It's not how I saw our season. I would have had him probably, to be honest, maybe 5th behind Ridley and Jakey. But again, I was huge on Jake this year. I think that his season, despite the plaudits it's been getting, has still been underrated. So it is what it is. And obviously Snelling's rated very internally. He's rated very highly, and he's obviously doing his role. And I can see all that personally on the field. I just don't know if he, for mine, had a better year than someone like Jordan Ridley, or, as you've just sort of pointed out, even Darcy Parrish. Like that to me just seems an insane situation.
It does reflect that blue-collar ethos, though, that the coaches do seem to be pushing. He's the ultimate blue-collar player for us in the way that his game seems to be more focused on the pressure acts and the tackles and playing the team role, and rewarding that sends a message to the playing group that if you fulfill your role in the team as the coaches outline it, you'll be rewarded in some way. The other one I do want to point out is Jaden Laverdie. I'm really happy for him. Top 10 in the Crichton medal. Played every game this year. Never played more than 10 games in a season. Really locked down that back spot. I think he's a potential All-Australian in that spot, the way he played, the way he controlled contests, the way he used his body, and his ability to push on and really anchor that defence, even as an undersized player against players much bigger than him. Sporno, what do you see Laverdie going forward? Is he going to be a key back for us, or do you think we'll be looking for another strong key back to allow Laverdie to play on second and third talls?
I think he's more of your second and third tools, but it was very encouraging. I watched him I must admit I was sceptical at the start of the year. I do realise he played in the back line when he was in the juniors and everything, but I was still a little bit sceptical. And each week he just amazed me. I thought his season was right up there with Ridley. So, I know Ridley came fourth and he came sixth. So there's not much difference there. But together, I think they're going to form a really good back line together if they can stay together and stay fit. I think that some of the guys that we recruited last year will end up as the main defender, and then guys like Ridley and Laverdie will start doing their thing, whether that's being the third man up or that sort of stuff, I think.
The other thing I just want to mention, the other player that I was surprised to see in the top 10 was Tipper. Again, genuinely bemused by the fact that Tipper's made it in the top 10. Now, he had a pretty good season for half a year, but then he did fall away fairly quickly. So some of these results in the voting, and I don't know if I'm being harsh or not, but yeah, I don't quite see it the way that the coaches see it, and I have just looked it up. They're given a rating out of 5, so all players are given an overall score for their match performance out of 5. They're also given a rating out of 5 for key bomber attributes that, when combined, give them a maximum of 25 votes per game. Only players that meet the set criteria for the match get votes awarded to them. So it seems a little bit wishy-washy for mine how we actually come up with these votes and leaderboards. And yeah, so as a result, I think we've seen some interesting results in the leaderboard this year. And I probably wonder why we don't just go back to the good old-fashioned, the coach and a couple of other blokes, at the local footy, you hand out the vote card before the game, 3, 2, 1, and off you go.
Yep, I agree with you 100% there.
It's a bit of overcomplication for overcomplication's sake. Pretty
much. It seems like they've just looked at it and gone, well, the AFL do a 3-2-1 system. We don't want to do that. We want to do our own special system. So seriously, give a rating out of 5 for key bomber attributes.
Yeah.
What the hell are key bomber attributes? For the last 3 years, you could say key bomber attributes have been turnovers and
red time
clangers.
Okay, moving on. The Premiership Cup has been awarded, but as we know, we're now moving into the real finals time, Adrian Dodoro season. The jackets are out, and we're moving on to the trading and drafting period, which we're all very excited for. Now, before we move on to potential targets, we have to talk about the people who have been not offered contracts or have retired. So Hooker and Ambrose retired during the season. Zaharakis was told he was not going to be offered a contract. He's looking for opportunities to play on and hasn't announced his retirement yet. Hasn't been much talk in the media about any potential destination for him. And then there were the 3 delistings of Carl, Johnson and Mosquito. Bonser, any thoughts in particular on the delistings or the Zaharakis not being offered a contract?
I don't think Zaharakis probably realistically expected to get offered a contract because, let's be honest, if he played next year, he'd be playing VFL football. He's got literally no chance of making our best 22 next year, even if he was to play that defensive half-forward role that he played last year, much to our dismay and displeasure at the time. And I don't see any other side picking him up. Maybe North Melbourne for an experienced head, but they have plenty of experienced heads. So I don't think anybody really needs him. If he wanted to go to the Gold Coast, yeah, maybe. But I think that I think David's probably starting to come to the realisation his AFL journey is over. He's going to go down for me, not as an all-time great, but I still think he deserves more plaudits than he gets. He's another Stanton in that he probably copped a fair bit of unfair abuse over the years because the blokes around him weren't good enough. There was nothing wrong with his performance. It's just we didn't have the cattle around him to really make him stand out or to support what he was doing. So as a result, we struggled, and because we were, as a fan base, we got used to having superstars because he wasn't a superstar. we sort of look down on him. But in terms of the delistings, Johnson and Mosquito, I mean, Mosquito, has it come back to bite us? I don't know. If it's come back to bite us, you can't predict a knee injury, so that's probably a little bit rough. Johnson, it was a bit of a speculative pick. I don't think he ever really showed anything once he was drafted to suggest he was going to become an AFL player. You take the punt. It was a late pick, so you take the punt. Ned Cale, I'm just amazed how much of a player he became after he was delisted. He seems to have improved out of sight after he was delisted, because from what I saw at an AFL level, he just never had it. There was all this talk about his smarts and he gets to the right spots, but he didn't do that at AFL level, and he wasn't quick. Now, I don't know, as a small forward, you don't necessarily need to be quick, but you need to be able to show something at AFL level, and he never did. And I know that he showed some things at VFL level, but there's a big step up between VFL and AFL, and every time he stepped up, he was left short, I thought. And to be honest, yeah, as I said, I was amazed how much of a superstar he became after he delisted, how much people were bemoaning his delisting. And I think I read at least 3 people saying, oh, he's going to go somewhere else and show us what we've missed. I'm going to say right now, there is no way Ned Cale gets picked up by another club for next year. Nobody in the AFL is looking for a slow forward pocket who couldn't get to the right spots at AFL level. It's just ludicrous to think that he'll be picked up because he showed something at VFL level. There's no chance.
Well, it's interesting because at the start of the year, he was our back pocket. He was the one that the coaches had identified as to play on those small forwards, which has been our Achilles heel this year is the small forward. And he only lasted 2 games before he was dropped, came back for 1 later in the season, and that was it. I think his papers were probably marked there, even though he does seem to be a popular teammate. I believe he lives with McGrath and Ridley and the boys all like him, but it's just unfortunate, as you say, he doesn't have enough attributes to appear to be successful at AFL level. Sporno, what are your thoughts on Mosquito? Obviously, it's very sad for us. We saw him in the Dreamtime game, and his smile just lit up the ground.
Yeah.
Do you agree? Do you think it's a missed opportunity, like Bonster suggests, or aspects?
It's just unfortunate, and it happens. You know, you're going to have your wins, you're going to have your losses, and Dreamtime, he was just so magic that night, and helped us, I think, all fall in love that little bit. The romance of football, but he got a knee injury at the wrong time. You could obviously see he's got a lot of talent, and who knows, maybe 3 or 4 years down the track, once he gets that bit of maturity, wouldn't surprise me if he came back into one of the sides down the track once he's got to that 25-year-old sort of age. But I think it's been good that their delistings have been really good so far. I guess the big question mark now is, does Marty Gleeson get another year? Does Clark get another year? We've got Kelly. It sounds like Kelly's coming in from Adelaide. What are your thoughts there, fellas?
Based on the listings, it seems we have 6 main list spots. I believe that Snelling will have to be upgraded with his 2-year contract. He'll, even with the extended rookie list time, he's finished 3rd in the BNF. I think it's time that he's upgraded to the main list, even though that distinction doesn't mean that much anymore. Kelly seems to be a sure thing to be coming in, so that's another spot, which leaves 4 spots on the main list. We do only have 3 draft picks of any value with the first rounder and the 2 thirds. You mentioned Gleeson and Clark. I think Gleeson, with the Kelly acquisition, is probably on very, very thin ice, and Clark depends on whether we get another midfielder in. I know there's talk about Dunstan. I think it's as much about him bringing Essendon up as anything Essendon suggested, but I don't think that's necessarily the worst option. I think he would be an upgrade on a Clark. Bonser, what are your thoughts in terms of who we should be targeting?
I think it was Ant that said earlier in the week that Dunstan is very much a no-brainer. He's going to be midfield depth, and I don't know if he's best 22, but he obviously, I mean, look at his, and the Brownlow's not the be-all and end-all, obviously, but he had an incredible result in the Brownlow for a bloke that's getting delisted, and there's talk about his spread from the contest isn't great, and his defensive pressure is very poor, and that's why the Saints got rid of him. He, as a player now, is going to have to be aware that that's his weakness. So he seemed to think in his exit interview that he was unfairly dealt with, and for comments he's made, I think that he believes personally that his defensive efforts aren't as poor as what St Kilda would have you believe. So it would be an interesting pickup because I'm not sure if he is best 22, but why not take a punt? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And just on Clark and Gleeson, they're actually both on the rookie list at the moment. So even if we were to drop them, we're not going to get any more main list spots. And I think we might be able to keep them both there on the rookie list for another year because I think they both got downgraded at the end of last year. Gleeson definitely did. I'm not sure about Clark because he's been in and on and off the rookie list for a while now. So, yeah, I also like the acquisition of Kelly should he come across because to me that means that Jordan Ridley's not going to have to play that lockdown defender role that we saw him play at times this year. I think Ridley's the best kick in our side, and I'd nearly go out as far as saying Jordan Ridley is going to be the best kick in the AFL in a very, very short period of time because he is that good by foot. It is ridiculous. And if we could get him playing less one-on-one lockdown defensive roles and more of that Alex Rance style float across, impact the contest and then use the ball the other way, we're going to be so much better off than by having him go one-on-one. And I know he's very good one-on-one, and I think he's actually the number one player for one-on-one contests. So, you could argue we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, but I think if you get Kelly in to play that role, it just frees up Ridley, and just with his amazing boot, it just makes us so much more potent coming out of the back line. And other than that, I'm not too sure what else is left on the table in terms of free agents. There was talk about Ben King, but he's not out of contract till next year, so I don't think there'll be any chance. Jordan Clark's going home, it seems. There's speculation today that we're going after Ben Long, but Stephen Savani said on Trade Radio, and I tend to agree with him, that I think that's based more on his name than actually any interest that we have in him. I certainly hope that we're not going to sell the farm for him because I'm one of those ones that don't rate him. But I mean, other than that, it's pretty slim pickings this year, really. I mean, George Hewitt's going to Carlton, Chera's going to Carlton. What else is there? Mason Cox. I mean, if you're desperate, but I don't think we are we?
I think Trade Radio is desperate because there's so little options to move. All the big names throughout the year that they've speculated signed, Merritt, Cripps, all those players that potentially could have moved or signed on. Just on Clark and Gleeson, both, as you say, both are on the rookie list. But with our recent success with mid-season draft and supplementary players, so your Snellings, your Durhams, Waterman, even Baldwin, after that draft period, I think we will like to have that flexibility to be able to take players in those selections. Obviously, with the COVID lockdowns, there's a lot of players who haven't had as much exposed form that might slip through the cracks. Durham seems to be one that's done that in the previous year, and we seem to have got a gem from that. So I think that's why I'm a little more bearish on Gleeson and Clark staying on the list. I think they'll want that flexibility. Sporno, any thoughts from you in regards to the trade? I know that we did inquire about Roses from Gold Coast as a small forward, which a lot of people do agree is one of our areas of concern. From my point of view, it's good that we seem to be targeting players to fit those areas of concern. As Bonsall said, Kelly to play that lockdown role. We've gone after a small forward to deal with our small forward depth. Is there any other areas that you feel we should be looking at in terms of trading players in to fill, or should we just go to the draft as much as possible?
I think it's a year to go to the draft. We've got pick 11, which will blow out to pick 13. And, where we have been pretty good in recent times is picking up some good talent with those later picks. So I think this year, definitely go to the draft. And they've, like you said, they've targeted people like Kelly for those specific roles, which will then free up Ridley. It sounds like they're pretty switched on, and they're all on the same sort of page there with our leadership in the coaching box and with drafting and recruiting.
Any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
My final thoughts are if you look at our list at the moment, it's probably in as strong a position as it's been in a very long time. And I think the only way forward for us to continue to strengthen that this off season is through the draft. I would hate to see us trade our picks this year. And the other thing to keep in mind, I think, for the trade period moving forward, because I know a lot of people are now talking trade the future first, trade this, trade that because of the Davey twins and all that. that's still 12 months down the track. We don't know what's going to happen. If you look at Collingwood to me is the perfect example of why you do not trade future picks for father-son points unless you know you're going to be an absolute superstar side. Because they traded as a middle-of-the-road side last year. They've now fallen down to pick 2 or pick 3 or whatever it is. It's highly likely they could have got Dacos and kept their first-round draft pick. So, I don't want us to end up this time next year have, the possibility to get both Davey twins and have kept our first-round pick. But we've blown it because we traded it this year in a fairly short-sighted manner. It's just my opinion anyway.
I agree with you on that. Also because, as has been often raised, Ben King is out of contract next year. If we trade our first round this year, then there's very little chance we'll have the currency to get him if he was available there. I think the other thing that's really come through in the post-season interviews, particularly from Rutten, is that the coaching staff really see there's a lot of natural growth and development on this list. They haven't squeezed all the talent out of the list yet. There's so many players, such as your Cox, your Perkins, your Reid. Jones has still got more to develop. You've got players like Baldwin and Eyre and Brand. We saw Caldwell for 3 games, and the way the coaches talk about him suggests that he could be as good as any of our midfielders. So there's a lot of natural development left on this list. I don't think we need to be necessarily selling the farm for anything at this stage.
No, exactly right, mate. Exactly right.
Well, that wraps us up for this evening. Thanks for being on the podcast, Sporno.
Thanks for having me.
And Bonser, thanks for allowing me, in inverted commas, to host.
Thanks for stepping under the bus that I just pushed you under, mate.
That's all right. I'm as flat as a pancake, but I still think I've got through it. And also big thanks to our editor, Beerfish, who's been doing the editing all year. Done a great job, especially with me and all my ums. Hopefully, Beerfish, I've done a better job for you tonight. So signing off episode 19 of the BigFooty Bombercast. We'll see you hopefully for a pre-draft special with draft specialist EDPS. And cut.
Right on, mate. Good job.